There's some differences. There's structural differences, there's historical differences, there are obviously contextual differences, but there are certain aspects of it that are worryingly similar. So, for instance, I found when I've spent time in the occupied territories that the occupied territories remind me quite a bit of the old homelands in South Africa, which were these very economically stagnant or poor little pieces of territory where all black South Africans were forced to live. And I think that the nature of separation is also very similar. The South African pass law system under apartheid, where every black South African had to carry a different identity document that allowed them only to go into certain places, except in Israel and Palestine. I think it's probably that aspect of it is even worse, because you have a situation where there are all sorts of different types of identity documents, where you even have separate roads, you even have separate car number plates, depending on whether you live in the occupied territories or in Israel, or whether you live in East Jerusalem or Israel proper. I also think the separation, there is even less contact, I find, between Israelis and Palestinians than there were between black and white South Africans. And in the Palestinian-Israeli context, everything is done to ensure that there's very limited contact. The most obvious example being the separation barrier, or what many people refer to as the apartheid wall. And that makes it incredibly difficult for people who have the same objectives to be able to work together. So there are those sorts of similarities, and then obviously the other similarity is the way in which Israeli society, like white South African society, has become so highly militarized in order to continue or to perpetuate the political situation as it is.
Mm-hmm. And why does the world react so different in these countries?
I think, very interestingly, there was a period of similarity. If you remember, under Ronald Reagan in America and Margaret Thatcher in the United Kingdom, their governments attempted to be more supportive of apartheid South Africa, which is what the sort of general tendency of Western nations, and particularly America, is now towards Israel. But I think that people find the Palestinian situation more difficult to grasp, because, in a sense, the Palestinians are what Edward Said described as the victims of the victims. So because of Jewish suffering during the Second World War and the Holocaust, and then the creation of the State of Israel, Jews were seen to have suffered for many thousands of years. And the fact that the creation of Israel meant the displacement of the Palestinians and the suffering of the Palestinians seems strangely lost, not only on many Jewish people, how the suffering that they are causing, but in many people, for instance in America particularly, who remain very supportive of Israel. And therefore I think the situation in some people's eyes is more complicated than the situation in South Africa was, where it was easy to describe the situation as just black and white, quite literally. So in that sense it's more complicated, but that doesn't justify the difference in attitude, where in so much of the world the resolution of the Palestinian issue doesn't have that level of support that the struggle against apartheid had, and I'm not quite sure why. I don't know whether it's because of the vested interests in Israel, or just because of the complexity. I suppose it's a combination of both. And I think it's also important to look at the economic dimensions of it. Israel plays an important role for America and other Western nations directly through its militarism. You know, many people have described the Lebanon War as almost a showpiece or a theatre for arms and for weapons. And Israel plays an absolutely crucial role in the weapons industry, mainly the Western weapons industry, America, and to some extent the United Kingdom. And so I think that's another reason why the same sort of scrutiny isn't given to the Palestinian question as it was given to the question of apartheid.
And do you think this is going to change, slowly or not?
The crucial factor in whether this is going to change is the American administration and the Obama administration, because the reality is that Israel remains the largest recipient of American aid. Every year, Israel receives between $3 and $4 billion from America to purchase American weapons. In addition to which, America is the one country that seems to have influence over Israel. And so the question becomes, is the Obama administration going to be fundamentally different on the question of Israel? And there are very mixed signals on that. I think in the first instance, there are people in critical positions in the Obama administration who are very sympathetic towards Israel and who are unlikely to push Israel in a direction that would lead to peace. But on the other hand, up until the time that he entered the presidential campaign, Obama had been perhaps more nuanced or understood more the complexities of the Israeli and Palestinian situation than any US political leader for many years. My own view is that the powers that be on the question of Israel and Palestine remain so strong within America that I don't think the Obama administration will be able to be fundamentally different or take a much harder line with Israel. The one area where I think there is hope is the Obama administration seems to realize that to resolve some of these very difficult or intractable conflicts in many parts of the world, they will need to talk to groups that they haven't spoken to before. And I think for the Middle Eastern situation, to not at least engage with Hamas, whatever one might think of them, I think it's going to be very difficult to find a solution. I think that one has to engage critically with Israel, with Fatah, the PLO, and with Hamas, because they are all crucial players in resolving this dispute. And perhaps the Obama administration will be more willing to do that than previous administrations have been.